Hey guys, welcome to the Color Me Mike podcast. So just a quick disclaimer up here at the top. Anything said during this podcast only reflects on me and or the guest. Sonity has nothing to do at all with anything that's being said here. Sonity is just a cool boba milk tea shop in Fremont, California that is kind enough to let us record the podcast here at their shop and kind enough to hook us up with some boba milk tea drinks. So everybody just chill and enjoy the episode.
My
We
side
could
view
also
is
just.
not great.
All right, so we're gonna So this you want to keep about a fist away from your
Okay.
mouth, right there, yeah, right about there. That's
Yeah?
good. Yeah, I'm just gonna adjust this so I can see your face.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that.
You heard it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
interesting. There you go. Oh, I got shocked
Okay.
again. Yeah, so just point it
We
at
need
you.
it. That's fine.
Yes, the chemistry we have right there.
Yeah,
There you go.
there you
It's just
go.
turning on. Get that. So if this feels uncomfortable for you all, feel free to adjust this any way you
Okay,
want.
yeah,
It's not
should be
going to
fine.
break.
Thank you so much.
It's meant to be adjusted like that anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, so you want to keep it below. You don't want it above you like this. You want it like right below your mouth, about a fist away.
Okay, and so I'm good as is now. Like
You know
if
what,
I
let
keep it
me-
like this.
Go ahead and keep talking. Yeah, I think you just made a book sale outside, didn't you? Yeah, this has been going very
I
well
did,
for people.
yes,
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, when Eric arrived, I would put it a little bit lower, the mic,
Okay.
just a little bit. So go ahead and
Yeah, I
lower
kind
it
of
down.
have a loud voice. Oh, lower like this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, point it more.
All right.
towards-
Yeah, that's probably good like that.
Yeah, there you go. That's a
Okay.
lot better. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much because I will adjust the audio levels.
Okay.
And this is a fun podcast already. I'm just going over the technical details of how I work it out. So I'm just going to clap real quick. So I have a sync point. I didn't get that much sleep last night because I was reading your book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the Bay Area stand-up comedy
Mhm.
one. Honestly, I had to force myself to stop reading it because I didn't know that much about the history here in the Bay Area. I didn't realize like so many big, like iconic names. Lenny Bruce,
First
Phyllis Diller?
arrest ever.
yeah,
was in
Mort
San
Saul.
Francisco.
I had no idea because
Yep.
it's not as if people don't mention Lenny Bruce all the time in the history of stand-up, but they never mentioned that it was here in San Francisco. They never mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that. I was always under the assumption that it was in New York
Yeah.
for some reason.
Well, and that's the thing is that a lot of comics kind of make their mark here and then they go elsewhere. So like they start to develop their voice. They start to know who they are. I mean, Richard Pryor he reinvented himself in Oakland and Berkeley. So, the Bay has that kind of impact on comics.
Okay, so real quick, I'm horrible at this. I never do an intro for.
Oh, sure.
For I guess I should. That's probably should be a good thing, right? So I have Nina G here. She's doing. You tour all over the country for stand-up comedy. I saw that you're a public speaker as well, and you're a historical consultant. I've never heard that title before. What is that?
You can't call yourself a historian unless you're a historian. So I'm still trying to figure out what I am. Because I can't say I'm a historian because I don't have that background and that education. But I published a book on history. So
Are we talking about just history of stand-up or history in general?
History of stand-up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's where the historical consultant thing
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I don't know what the fuck that
Because
means either.
when I saw that on your website, I was like, oh, I have never seen that before. I didn't know there was such a thing.
No, there is no such thing.
Yeah, I was reading your press release that you're kind enough to send me. You've truly loved stand-up comedy ever since you were a kid.
Yeah.
You're a comedy nerd.
Big time, yeah. I mean, when I was like 7 years old, I had a stuffed animal that I named Gilda after
Yeah.
Gilda Radner because that was the thing I loved the most. And like when all the little girls had crushes on movie stars and TV stars and musicians, for me, it was comics.
Yeah, it was Barry Sobel,
It was
right?
Barry Sobel, yes.
That's interesting is because I grew up watching like Barry Sobel, Bobby Slayton, but I never knew their names. Well, so it's only because of your book. Oh, that's who that. Because Barry Sobel was like in everything in late
227?
'80s,
Yes.
'90s. Yeah, you couldn't avoid the guy. It's like, oh, that's his name. I never knew his name, but he was in so many things.
Yes.
And I never knew he was a stand-up.
Oh, really?
As a kid, because when he was at because I'm 41.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ask you how old you are. I've learned my lesson.
48.
Yeah.
48.
Okay, so you're a little bit older than me,
Yeah.
but so you were old enough to like probably be exposed to stand-up comedy, whereas me, when like I hit the height of his popularity, I was probably anywhere between 8 to 10 years old.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
probably about right.
Yeah.
Because
So
like I found him in sophomore year of high school, so that would have been like, I don't know, like 88 or
14.
something, 87. No,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
88.
okay, yeah. So I was 8 years old. Yeah.
So there you go.
I remember he was in one of my favorite movies from that era. There was this movie called Side Out. Not a lot of people know this
Oh,
movie. It was a
yeah.
volleyball movie.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that sounds awful.
You know, it was actually really
Really?
good. It starred C. Thomas Howell.
Okay.
This blonde dude. I was trying to think of the name of the show. It was really popular in the 80s. God, I can't remember what it was called, but there was this good-looking guy, a blonde guy with long hair, and he was kind of the co-star of this movie. And Barry Sobel was in there too. He's a supporting actor. He played the best friend of C. Thomas Howell. This podcast is just me naming, obscure
Barry Sobel,
movies.
Barry Sobel,
Yeah,
Barry
yeah,
Sobel.
Barry
Who
Sobel.
knew?
But no, but that's like I said, like I didn't know that was his name, but I saw him in everything. So I was really enjoying your book on that
good.
level too. It's like, and Bobby Slayton, and like that guy was in a lot of movies too in the 80s. It's like, wow, I
Yeah.
never knew.
Yeah, and he was so big here in the 80s. Like he was on the Alex Bennett show all the time, and him and Stephen Pearl had like an open invitation to go on the Alex Bennett show anytime, and then they would fill out the punchline. So it was a whole thing.
And then one thing from reading your book, I really like when you were trying to hunt down open mics, you were calling bars just to see if they would
Yes.
even let you in because you were under 18, and you had like this handmade list. I don't think people realize how good they have it now in terms of
I know, no,
open
totally.
mics.
Like, yeah, this was way before the internet, and I would go through like the Guardian and the Examiner and the Chronicle and the East Bay Express, and I'd take notes like, "Oh, there's an open mic in Oakland at the Coffee Mill. I'm gonna call up and see if they allow minors." So I had this list, and the one place that I called up, my favorite call of them all, was to Dorsey's Locker, which that's where Linnell had an open mic for years and years and years and years. And their open mic back then, I called up. I was like, "Hey, do you guys allow minors?" And that's when the guy yelled out to the rest of the bar, "Hey, this bitch wants to be Eddie Murphy." And I hung up scared because the bitch really did want to be Eddie Murphy. So that was, he was on to me.
I know but in the book, if I remember correctly, you had wanted to do stand-up, and then for some reason, for 10 years, you didn't try it. Like,
No, for 25 years.
Also, like, what happened in that 25 years?
Well, actually, that whole story can be found here.
Oh,
at
there you go. She has the book
Stutterer
with her.
Interrupted, the comedian who almost didn't happen. And it's because, in case your audience hasn't heard yet or figured it out, I don't know how they couldn't. But I am a person who stutters, and so back in the early 90s, late 80s, there weren't any comics who were doing comedy who stuttered. The closest thing I had was Stuttering John on the Howard Stern show.
Yeah.
And he didn't do comedy. And so to me, I was like, a prerequisite to being a stand-up is to be fluent, meaning that you don't stutter. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to move on to other stuff. But anytime that I had to write a paper in college, I would write about comedy. I wrote this really great paper about Lenny Bruce and Jerry Lewis and the Marx Brothers and their relationship to masculinity at the time that they were around. So, like, I still enjoyed it. I just didn't engage in it. But after I attended a conference for people who stutter in 2009, I came back from that and I realized, because it was my first time around a lot of people who stuttered, and I realized how much space I relinquished up to other people. So when I came back from that, I was like, okay, I'm changing my life. I started to make some changes in my personal life. And then 6 months after that, I started comedy. And it'll be 12 years come March.
Well, I mean, it's definitely. Would you consider yourself a success in comedy at this point? You tour all over the country. You know, you're a legit.
Some months yes,
headliner.
some months no. Ask me in October because that is Disability Awareness Month, and people want to hire you then, but then they forget about you the rest of the months. So it would be really nice if people wanted a disability event all year round. Like African American History Month just shouldn't be in February. It should be every month. And so we need to integrate ourselves more. And that's a challenge I have financially because October, great. Other months, So I do okay.
How much did the stuttering get in your way once you started really pursuing stand-up? Was it as much of a hurdle as you thought it would be, or it wasn't at all?
You know, when I was 17, I thought you just couldn't stutter. And you've seen me do comedy. I just stutter and I integrate that into my act. You know, it's a comedy rule if you put the most obvious thing first. So I put it first sometimes not. It depends how much time I have. But like initially when I was doing it, a lot of my jokes were on stuttering because I do come from a disability activist background. So what I wanted to do in comedy was like I looked at people like Wanda Sykes and Paul Mooney and Chris Rock and the black comics who are doing civil rights kinds of things in their act. I was like, okay, what if a disabled person did that? So that's kind of how I approached it then.
But now your stand-up just covers everything, whatever you want to talk about, right?
Yes. Yeah, but still that activism part is there because I don't make fun of my stuttering. I make fun of other people's reactions.
Oh, that's a great angle to take at it. Because I remember at the show we did together at Epidemic Ales, you made that very clear. Yeah, I'm not stuttering, for laughs here. I'm not going to use it to like accentuate a joke. And because I assume people would assume that.
Think that.
Yeah,
they
right?
Always, because then the thing is like nobody stutters as good as me. Like that is like Meryl Streep kind of stuttering if a comic got up on stage. But if you look at like my YouTube comments, people think that I'm faking it. I did an inauguration festivity thing for this president, I should say, because he stutters, and people are like, she doesn't stutter. I just know she doesn't stutter. It's like, please.
Does Biden stutter? I thought he was more senile than a stutterer.
No, and that's the thing is that people like confuse them and they merge them. He has always stuttered, and what he does is sometimes he'll substitute things. Sometimes he'll kind of put an extra punch on a word so that he stutters less on it. So he does these kinds of tricks. And it's his story is that he has overcome it. But when everyone thinks he's senile because of his speech, it's like, no, you're not overcoming it. It's not happening.
Wow.
If we just talk about the stuttering more, you might be able to combat some of that other stuff.
Yeah, because he has a big problem with his public image now. Everyone thinks he's lost his mind.
Facilities.
His facilities.
Now, and the thing is, like, there are certain examples where it could be more cognitive decline, but some of it is also stuttering, and a lot of it is that.
I don't think anyone has said that about him at all.
They did during the election, but then I think all that kind of died down. So yeah, so kind of goes up and down.
So
and like he doesn't address it in the way that I do, which everybody has their own choice in how they disclose and talk about it. It's just when you're famous, it comes back on me.
So you were involved in his inauguration?
I mean, involved.
I didn't realize you were that big.
Yeah.
My God, Nita.
So there was like 5 days in the inauguration, and so I went on the first day.
Huh?
So it was like very much like the minor leagues, like like the D.
So what was your role exactly? Like, what did you do?
I got to perform stand up.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And so I had like 3, 4, 5 minutes, and most people just kind of did Zoom, but I was like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I overly dressed up as I always do, and I filmed it at the Alameda Comedy Club, and I had my parents there in the audience. And then we sent in the film, and Patrick Ford over at the Alameda Comedy Club was great because they helped to mix it and make it good.
Oh,
So,
wow. He
yeah.
did you a nice solid. Are you past that Alameda Comedy Club?
No, I'm not past anywhere.
That's interesting. I would think like someone like you, because you like I said, you tour, you're a headliner, that you would just be passed everywhere, like almost kind of like they give people an honorary degree. Oh yeah, of course you're passed. Here, come on in.
No.
It's like, wow,
No. Like, yeah. And the thing is that I don't really like to host. So that can kind of be a barrier to.
Was that a big thing to getting
being
passed?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like the first step, and then feature is the next step. And I would love to be a past feature at any of the clubs in the Bay Area if they would like a stuttering comic to do that. But I have a really hard time faking enthusiasm, and I'm not a great host. And especially the comedy that I sometimes have to do, I'm not very excited. Oh, here's somebody who's going to say racist dick jokes. It's like, yeah, I'm not cool with that.
That's something my wife gets on me all the time about. Not racist dick jokes, but like I can't fake enthusiasm, or like you'll see it on my face. Like my disappointment or my disgust. I can't hide it at all.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, we'll be out in public sometimes. She'll tell me like, "Oh, Mike, you're making those faces."
You're gonna have to work on that if you want to host.
I don't know. I mean, is there any way to circumvent the whole hosting thing?
I mean, I have, but it also means that I'm not past. That the things that I go for more are like, I do colleges and I do corporations.
But that's great money, right?
It's a money super good. It's super good. And also, like, I have a separate kind of set for that than I do for comedy. Like, I'll talk about my long vagina on stage when I'm at a club or when I'm at a show. I won't do that when I'm talking at Coca-Cola. Like, it's a very different kind of thing. But what's nice is that I don't have to be funny the whole time because I'm more of a storyteller and bringing a disability awareness message there.
When you do those corporate gigs, how many minutes do they expect out of you?
And like, I try not to go over an hour because there's like a sweet spot of like an hour 15 where people are like, oh, this is really great. An hour 16, they're like, oh, this is too long. So I try to close it out at an hour because you always want them to want more.
Wow, an hour. Like that just seems so beyond me at this point.
But the thing is, it's what I like to do best, especially now because a lot of stuff's on Zoom and we just haven't been interacting well, is I like to do like a half hour of me talking and kind of like a PowerPoint. So I show some old pictures and stuff. And then I go into a Q&A. And like a lot of the Q&As already, like I've already thought about it. I've already answered these. But because people think it's impromptu, it lands really, really well. Yeah.
So very clever of you. You're so clever.
It's just, 12 years in comedy. Hopefully I picked something up.
Yeah, you would hope so.
Yeah.
Right? Since you mentioned pictures, I have to say that's one thing that I really enjoyed about your book too. I'm about 2/3 of the way in. I really wanted to finish it, but I was like at some point, I gotta sleep.
Nice.
No, but all the pictures that you put on there.
120 pictures about?
Yeah, I love like seeing historical photos. I'm big on the history, and I loved it so much. I'm really enjoying it. The one thing you mentioned in the book, because when I was reading it, I realized it was probably really hard to write because you even acknowledge it. Like each chapter, each person could be 400 pages on their own, right? And you're really given more kind of a bird's eye view of the whole history of Bay Area stand-up comedy,
Exactly.
right? What made you want to do that?
It's a pandemic. I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? And I started to do like a video podcasty thing where I interviewed comics, and I called it the comedy time capsule. And I just wanted to get, because like what interested me was what would the impact of the pandemic be on comedy? And I tried to look that up for this Spanish flu, but comedy wasn't the way it is now. So it wasn't performed in the same way. It wasn't the same kind of venues, all of that. And humor, I was like, okay, are we going to go dark if we have a bunch of people die? Are we going to have to express that with like really dark humor, or are we going to have to not talk about it? So I was very interested in that, and I couldn't find anything from this Spanish flu. So I was like, okay, well, what is going on now? And in doing that, I interviewed Marga Gomez, who is a legend in Bay Area stand-up. And she started to talk about the Valencia Rose. And that was very much a cornerstone of queer comedy. It was started in part by Tom Amiano, who is considered the mother of gay comedy. And it's because so many people came out of there, and the Valencia Rose, like, not only was fostering gay comic voices at a time where, like, the F word, like the bad F word, not fuck, but the bad F word, that was like constantly being said on stage. And you had like the Andrew Dice Clays, and so homophobia was really high in the culture. So they had a place where they could really grow. And with that, a lot of female comics grew there too. And Jane Dornacker, I always say her name wrong. She was there, and she was everywhere, but she especially was there, and she was straight. And Whoopi Goldberg was also someone who came out of the Valencia Rose.
I had no, like I said, I had no idea the amount of big names that came out of the Bay Area. And why do you think it's never mentioned that they came out of the Bay Area?
I mean, I think that San Francisco's really bad at remembering it. Like, you know, when I go to City Lights Books in San Francisco, once I asked where the humor section was, and they're like, oh, we don't have one. And this is like the bookstore in San Francisco that published The Howl, that is right there in the heart of North Beach, might even be the heart of North Beach. Got nothing. They have nothing on us. And meanwhile, like, there are murals all around this city for everything. Nothing on comedy. I think we had one of Robin Williams, but that is no longer there. But, you know, like when I went to Pueblo, Colorado, I'm driving around there because I was doing a show at the library. And they have this wonderful mural there of comics on a theater. And I'm like, why don't we have this? All those, like half those comics came from us, and we don't have that. So like, I would love for San Francisco to start to remember the people who had grown up here in terms of their comedy.
Well, I mean, hopefully, you know, your book will help with that. Like I said, I had no idea. It definitely opened my eyes up, because, you know, we always hear about the Boston comics, the New York comics. They're so proud that they came from those areas.
All the Boston comics came here.
Yeah,
they all got tired of those audiences, and were like, I want to do art instead of fighting with some guy in the front row. And so, you know,
no one ever mentions San Francisco. I mean, even like you say, like the people that are like around today, Moshe Cash or Ali Wong, like no one ever says, yeah, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where I came
Ali
up.
Wong does. Ali Wong had a show, and I believe it was centered in San Francisco.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she, in her book, has a chapter, as do I, in the book Stutterer Interrupted. And also OJ wrote about it in this book. it's a brainwash, and Tony Sparks, because Tony Sparks and the brainwash for my generation of comics and for Allie's was like a really important place.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Brainwash is the one I hear because I came into it only 5 months ago. Brainwash obviously wasn't, but that's what everyone.
.com way killed it.
Yeah,
so.
but that's what everyone always talks about. It's like, oh, Brainwash. That's really where a lot of people got started. It's legendary. They tell me if you ever like talking to more experienced comics, you want to seem like you know what you're talking about. Just drop Brainwash, and then all of a sudden they'll respect you. So you were still around for that time.
Oh yeah,
Tony
I mean,
Sparks.
I met my husband at the Brainwash.
Oh, really?
I met two of my best friends there.
So is your husband a comic too?
Yes.
Ooh, that can be kind of like a little bit of an iffy situation. Most people don't want to do that.
He's also an educator, so like, he'd been doing comedy for a long time, and he's pretty much quit. But he's always in the mind to write, and always in the mind to make jokes and stuff like that. I need a man who's really smart and really funny, and so.
I mean, I'm gonna bring it back to your book because, like I said, I really was so interested. There were so many rooms and available before, and so many of those historical ones have, what's it called, the City Zoo, right?
The
It's Holy City Zoo, right?
City Zoo, yes.
But it was crazy to see that it was booming at one point, and now there's only like 4 of them left from that. And it's like, it makes me really sad. It's like,
yeah. Well, and the zoo closed in 1993 permanently,
yeah.
And so I kind of see that as the end of the boom. So that's when it's like, okay, now it's buried and done, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the 80s, there was the Holy City Zoo, there was the other cafe, there was Cobb's Pub, there was the Punchline. And then in the East Bay, they had Tommy T's in San Leandro and in Concord and a bunch of other ones. And they had foo bars. And then in San Jose, they had roosters. So it was everywhere.
Roosters is in Sunnyvale, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So San Jose's improv. This is the thing. Like Tommy T's, I had no idea there was one in San Leandro, and that's where it started. We just know it as Pleasanton now,
Yes.
right? But Pleasanton was one of the later locations. It's only now that it's the only one that's still stuck around, right?
Yes. Right now it is, I think. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna ask about. You hear that noise?
Yeah, I do.
That's never been on before. That's only today. So I'm gonna ask what that's
Okay.
about. But yeah, he's with a customer. I'll ask him later because I can cut most of it. I can cut most of
But
it out.
that's
I'll
like
fill
a
around
constant.
background. Yeah, as long as it's constant, actually, it's not
Okay.
too bad.
Yeah,
That's
so that
easy
maybe
to
be constant.
Yeah, it's just whether if it's on a frequency that's close to the human voice, that's what makes it difficult. Again, I'm turning this into a super technical
no,
podcast.
that's
so
okay.
I'm sure people find that very interesting to know. But could you see me like every now and then? I'm kind of looking. It's like, is that ever gonna stop?
No, I
It's like,
know when that
it's
stuff
been-
happens.
Yeah, this is. It happened at towards the end of Eric's podcast, but it did stop then. That's the thing. So I'm wondering if this is something we can
stop
turn. Yeah. You know what? Hold that. I'm gonna
Okay.
pause real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, so it turns out what that noise is. There's not a blender, but it's like one of those electronic whisker things in a bowl, and it's whipping up a bunch of whipped cream.
Oh.
So definitely can't stop that. I mean, that's
No.
they're being generous enough just to let us do here and hook it up
Yeah.
to the drink. So I'm
Deal
definitely
with
not
it.
gonna say,
Deal
yeah,
with it.
exactly. You know, who am I to complain? Say, excuse me. Yeah, you got to stop making your
Tone it
products.
down.
Yeah, we're
Can you
doing a
tone the whipping
podcast. Yeah, so I just have to put up with it. I mean, at a certain point, you don't even really hear it. No, I'm lying. You hear it all the time.
No,
but-
I totally hear it.
Yeah, but we'll
Sorry.
do our best to not get too distracted by it. It's hard because I try my best not to talk too much inside baseball about comedy, but it's like, well, when I have someone like you on who's been at it for 12 years, you're touring all over the place, how can I not help but ask about it? You know,
Yeah,
you've
no,
got
and I'll
so
talk
much
about
wisdom.
it. So
At what point, like, how many years in was it where you've transitioned from being like an open micer to, you know what, I'm actually like booking shows now?
I mean, it kind of all depends about that. Like, I think like booking shows, I think happened fairly quickly. It's the first one I did was, ironically enough, being a person who stutters. It was with Kiko show, which is speech the therapy. And so I was really glad that was my first one. It was at Bruno's in the Mission. I got $5. And this is like the only field where like you get $5, you're now a professional comic. So congratulations. It's very strange. And so, I think it happened fairly quickly, but like, I mean, I'm one of the few people who have been in it for so long who still do open mics. And a lot of that is because of my stuttering and because of my dyslexia, that I need to get the rhythm of the joke, because whatever rhythm's in my head may not be the rhythm of how I say it. So, it's there's still the hard work that needs to be done, like I did when I first started.
What would you say are the biggest lessons you learned over your 12 years, that really, I guess, you were the one way when you're first starting out, and now that you're more experienced, you've learned some lessons like, okay, this is the way you're supposed to do it, or this really helps me out.
I think what I see, and like, I mean, I entered it so late in life that I think I already had a perspective. And I think what I see a lot of baby comics, and I say baby comics because they could be 41 or they could be 22, but you're all developmentally at the same stage, that you think there's one way to go. Like, to be past the punchline is not your only way. That there are multiple ways to go, and sometimes you have to harness, or you have to know who you are and kind of what you want in this, so that you can, like, some stuff may work out and some stuff may not, but you want to kind of like make your own path in this and not go with the path that everyone thinks it ought to be.
Okay, you know what? That's actually really encouraging, because that's pretty much been my approach to it right from the beginning. Because, everyone thinks, okay, San Francisco, that's where I have to be. And I just always feel like, no, there's probably other options all over the place. Like, you can make your own. I mean, because I learned that from, I have a film production videography background, and it's very much the same thing, Well, even that more so, there is no set path. You kind of create your own path. And so I've kind of been taking that approach, to stand-up comedy too. It's like, okay, because if I have to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big fan of San Francisco in general as a city. The parking.
Because you're East Bay. You're East Bay. That's why.
Well, actually, I grew up in the South Bay, East Side, San Jose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm East Bay now, but it's just more so just like the practicalities
South
of
Bay is a different thing too.
The parking, how expensive everything is, and it's dirty as hell now. It's
always been dirty though.
Has it?
I used to volunteer at a Head Start in the Tenderloin. I'd see poop on the ground all the time.
This is just part of the landscape.
Yeah, it's just like, and I was like, that's not dog poop. That's human poop. But there wasn't an app to keep track of it then, so it wasn't being documented. And and that's the thing, is that like, I have very much a love-hate thing with San Francisco, which I think a lot of East Bay
we were talking about that
do.
a little bit with Justin Carisi, right?
Yeah. But I'm from here. He's not. So I got more of an authority on this because I'm not from the East Coast. No, and I'm from Alameda, and I lived my childhood in Alameda and San Leandro, and then I've been in Oakland for like almost 20 years now. Haven't lived anywhere else. Went to UC Berkeley, did all my education here. So San Francisco, like, it's gotten so .commie, and the disparities economically suck, and that's one of the things in the book, is that a comic could pay $200 a month.
Yeah, that blew my mind.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now that is so far from the case, that it's not a city that supports the arts. And so there's all that stuff. But the nice thing about San Francisco and the Bay Area is that we don't have to stay here. Like, I do tons of open mics over in San Jose. I go to Modesto. I go to, Santa Rosa has some great shows. And so we have the flexibility here to go everywhere, but your perspective changes with every place you go. And that's why it's really important for white comics to get out of their white shells and go to a culture that is different than theirs and do an open mic or do a show there, because you learn about other people's perspectives, and it makes you a better and more flexible comic.
So, I mean, as you know, advanced, I would say not advanced, but as much as you've already progress in your comedy career, open mics still play a role in your comedy?
For me, yes. And for a lot of comics of my place, no. But that's also where, as a disabled person, you got to work harder than everybody else. And as a person who stutters, I need to know the rhythm of the joke, because when I practice the joke in my car all alone, I'm not going to stutter, but when I do it in front of people, I do. So I need to understand that.
Because I ran into you and me and Dave at an open mic in San Jose. And
yes.
I'm not going to say which one it was, but it was a shit show. It was just pure chaos. I think you made the right choices too. You know what? Especially where you're at in your career. This one, I think you can skip.
Especially where I'm at with, like, my mom is recovering from lung cancer.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't need COVID because I had to get a tight 5 minutes in.
No, you made the right choice. Like,
Okay,
it's like, no,
good.
you made the right choice. I mean, for me, where I'm at, it's just like, you know what? I'm already here. You know, I might as well see what I can do in this type of. I won't be going back. That's for sure. I will not.
I would totally go back if it wasn't for COVID. But
well, I guess because the thing is, like, I remember I saw the posting on Bacon. Right, for those who don't know, that's the Bay Area Comedy Network. It's a Facebook group where you can find all the mics. You can find a lot of shows. You can even book shows there too. And he specifically mentioned, okay, we've built an audience for you guys. Come on down. And as soon as, as an open micer, you see there's an audience. Yeah, that your eyes open wide, right? Oh, I'm not going to perform in front of just a room full of bitter comics. There's going to be an actual audience. But then I get there and the audience is 99% high school students.
Was that what that was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, ooh, and then it was just pure chaos, the way it was being run, they're over there where they have, the register and everything. I don't know how much I want to say because legally speaking, I don't want to like put them on blast, but there's a lot of loud activity going on. So it's just like, it really just wasn't like ideal and conducive to comedy at all. But I mean,
a lot of things aren't.
Yeah.
most shows that we have are not. I mean, I have a video up on my YouTube where I was performing at a bar in Foster City, and a fight broke out. A guy asked me for money while I was on stage, but on stage is like the dance floor, know. And then the cops came. The guy from the fight comes running to the back to flush his drugs down the toilet. The cops go after him. One of the cops stays and he watches me. And then I start talking to the cop. And he asked me if I had any cop jokes. And then they arrest the guy right in front of my stage, and the whole thing I luckily caught on tape, and I erased everybody's face except for the cops. But I did 20 minutes, and it was like my dirtiest 20 because like you have to do it.
You have to.
But like I was kind of like this is why I do comedy, is for the absurdity of these situations and the weirdness, and I love that weirdness. Like the other night, I was like, I'm gonna get up there and I'm gonna do my most female dirtiest jokes on these people. And I think it would have been interesting.
It was interesting because, I recently came at it with the same mindset. It's like, okay, I know I'm going to have to dirty the fuck, out of my material. And I remember, because I grew up in that area, actually. So, so my strategy was this. Okay, you know what? I'm going to pander to them. I'm going to start, like, naming the local high school and all that, because I know these are definitely high school students. So I went up there. It's like, all right, make some noise if you're from Independence High School. Nothing. So then I named another local high school. Make some noise if you're from Mount Pleasant. Nothing. I was like, Make some noise if you're going to high school at all. Nothing. It's like, so you're telling me you guys are all high school dropouts? That's what's happening here. It's like it did not.
So you didn't name the continuation high school? Is that
No, I didn't. I was
yeah.
trying to give them some credit. But, well, I guess not if I was calling them dropouts by the end of it.
No, you kind of turned on them.
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, I for the for what it was, I actually did well. I remember getting off stage and people, were giving me the dabs and everything. Yeah, they fist bump. They liked it, but man, it's just. I get what you're saying. Like, it's definitely it's really like working out with a weighted vest, right? But I don't know if I want to be doing that all the time.
No, and you don't. But also, for me personally, like, I get more of a high in bad situations than in good ones.
Really?
Yeah. So, like, if I have a good set at the punchline, like, oh, that's nice. But if I can do 20 minutes in front of 3 people while there's an arrest, I feel so good about myself, and I'm high, and so
I guess you're experienced enough to know how.
Yeah, I'm just weird. It's not that I'm experienced.
You're not
I'm
the only
just
one
weird.
that's like that, though. I know. I mean, in the short time I've been, there's a lot of comics who live off of that chaos, and they do really enjoy that. Because if you can make something work in that situation, I guess it's like you're good, right? Like, I mean, to a lesser extent, I've experienced that where I'll go to a mic and there's just 2 like non-comics at the bar and it's super empty. But I know if I can get them to listen to me the whole time and they're like laughing,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, yeah, I
They
did
pay
really
attention.
well there. Yeah,
And paying attention is just as good as getting laughs.
really, I've never heard someone.
Yeah. No, because if, like, is a thing that you're saying interesting enough for them to stop talking to each other? Because at an open mic, some of your stuff isn't going to hit, and it's a lot of premises. But if the premise is interesting enough to hold their attention, then there you go.
Okay, so we're talking about open mics. One thing I think a lot of people starting out with that they're curious about, because when you're doing open mics, 99% of the time it's just comics, right? So how can you accurately gauge whether your material works or not? Because that's hard in a room full of comics that you see all the time.
And they're going to laugh at stuff that is darker, so you need to keep that in mind. And I think, like, through the pandemic, what I've learned is to kind of trust yourself in it. Like, if it's something that you feel is good and not a cheap laugh, because sometimes comics will go for the cheap laugh too, that you really want to look at that in yourself and see.
Yeah.
If that makes sense? Does that make sense?
It does make sense because, it's like something very, like the past 2 weeks, I've kind of had a very up and down experience. Like the week before, I was prepping this tight 5-minute set for a competition in Oakland, and everywhere I'd gone, open mics mostly. But, a lot of these open mics were actually non-comics, and it had been landing really strongly, really well. And then the night of the competition, it just goes okay. It's like, it's like, well, I mean, I guess in that aspect, it was very clear what happened because, these competitions, it's basically a bringer show. And it had like one comic who basically looked like Hannah Gatsby, brought half the audience with her. And it's like, okay, this is the wrong material for these people. And then, okay, that's just not going to be my night. But this week, I was working on specific bits. I was punching up an old one and working on a new one. And it's the same thing. It had been landing really well at open mics. And even at a place, a Milk Bar, where there was an actual audience, it killed. And then on my actual show on Thursday, it just went over okay. It's like what the hell's going on here?
There's so many variables, though. Like, and just like you said, if somebody brings the audience and this is where, like, some audiences just I don't like, and that is when, like, they're there for their friend, and their friend's been doing comedy for like a month, and they're like, you're not funnier than my friend. I was like, oh, bitch, I am. And it's those types of situations where, like, it's just is what it is, and you deal with it. And, like, I once won the whole competition it was Bunjo's comedy competition. I was like my third year in, and I won the whole thing because the woman who came in second brought her friends and forgot to tell them not to vote for me because it was like, hey everybody, who's your top three? And so I touched her audience because her audience was very much someone that I would like, or someone that they were people who would like me. And so like I snuck in there. So like you never know how any of that's going to go, and you just have to go with it and kind of like not take it personally. And also you have to eat so much shit in comedy in order to get good, to be good. And you have to maintain that good. Like it'll go away.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that's the one thing I'm kind of realizing is said something me and Dave mentions to me all the time is about getting to that point where you're consistently killing, like in a lot of different environments. Like he says, once you get to that point, that's when you should start thinking about trying to get into the punchline. Like before that, definitely, not a good idea. And that competition was, I learned a big lesson from that because there were comics that they were definitely able to get over that wall of lesbians, in the crowd. In fact, Sergio Blanco, he won still, despite, Hannah Gatsby bringing half the crowd with her. So it just shows me he performed and wrote his material in a way that was just more universal than mine. And then that's a lesson to take home. It's like, okay, I need to really, keep that in mind now from now on.
No, and that's where if you become flexible with an audience and you can go this way, you can go that way. Like there's some audiences where I can start off without stuttering stuff. There's other ones that don't. There's some, like I performed the other night in Walnut Creek, and it wasn't going as well as I had hoped. Like I kind of thought I should have started without my stuttering stuff. Ends up one of the women in the audience, her brother stutters, and she was super defended because she thought I was making fun, and she thought that I was faking. And then she was with her 10 friends, and they were all like, And so when I talked about aging as a woman, because they were all this same age, they were on board. If I brought it back to the stuttering, not. So you just don't know what's going on for an audience, and to be flexible enough to fit and to feel it out.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's what happened to me on Thursday. Because I was doing, like I said, I punched up an old bit and I did something like brand new that I think kind of turned them against me, where it made me look more arrogant as opposed to, being funny. It's like, and I never done that twist before because it'd been landing really well. So it occurred to me, like, maybe that was it. Like,
that was probably it.
I got off to a bad start and got them not to like me right there. And it's like, that's very interesting.
Yeah, isn't that? Because you're in a relationship with the audience.
Yeah.
And so you have to think of it as like they're this blob and you're you, and how are you going to win them over to be friends? Because it's easier to make them laugh if you're friends.
Yeah, so like if you can get them right away on your side, and that would really be the best thing, right?
And that's where like a .com San Francisco audience, sometimes I don't want to make them laugh because I'm like, fuck you, you fucking come in and you gentrify our fucking shit, and I gotta be in a rent-controlled apartment forever and ever and ever because you run all this up, and then I can't afford to live in the place, like all this in my head. I'm like, why the fuck should I entertain you? And I've learned that
it got really heated there. I felt it. I know,
it's Italian. No, and so, and that's where like I have to check myself in those kinds of situations, because I think that you can find a way to connect with everybody everywhere, but you also have to like kind of understand your own emotional shit to connect with them.
I like it. We're doing some advanced comedy jujitsu here.
Right?
But that's why I like talking to people like you and me and Dave, is like I can gain those nuggets of wisdom. Because I feel like, I'm sure I'm going to make my mistakes, but if I can learn from people who've already done it, why not?
But you got to learn on your own, because, it's like everybody has to find their way around it. Because what works for me, what works for Dave, and what will work for you, it all is defined in a different way because people also project onto you stuff. And so that projection, and that's probably what happened with the audience the other day. I was like, oh, look at this guy that thinks he's a hotshot. Fuck him. And so that's where you need to know that they're perceiving you in a particular way and how to work with that.
Since we're talking about that, and since I brought it up, it seems to be there's a fine line with self-deprecating humor that you can get away with, because you don't want to do to the extent where people kind of look at you, yeah, you know what, you're nothing. Yeah, why the fuck am I laughing at you? But like, there's something funny about self-deprecating humor too, and I've noticed there's a fine line. You can't. Well,
and also if society deprecates you, how much do you want to take that on?
Yeah.
And, because you're from a Filipino background, like, do you want to buy into the stereotypes and do you want to exploit that to make, like, white people laugh or Filipinos laugh? Like, I don't know if that's how you would want to do that. And that's for me with stuttering. I don't want to make fun of stuttering, but I will make fun of my Italian nose. Like, there are certain things that I will do, but there are certain things that I won't do. And I think everybody needs to figure out where they are with all that. If that
that's
makes
something
sense.
that's come over time, right?
I mean, I kind of knew it when I first started because when I first started, I was like, I want to be the white disabled female Paul Mooney, because he just comes out and says it and he's in your face about issues. And for me, I wanted to do that around disability stuff. Far from that, far from a Paul Mooney, but like that is what my inspiration was. That I didn't want to be a sellout.
Okay, so we are coming up on 1 hour here. I'm trying to keep these to 1 hour. So what should people know about your book? And where can they get it? Because I know you are going to have like I read your press release, you're going to have events for the release of the book, and I'm going to release this podcast episode during that week too. So hopefully
Thank you.
I'm going to bump you up in the lineup. So to use industry lingo. But what should people know about this new book that you've written?
The book can be bought pretty much everywhere. I think it'll even be sold in CVS's. I don't know how long that Lenny Bruce's words will be sold in a CVS, because I still think they're kind of controversial. And so we'll see if that lasts. But at your independent bookstore would be a great place. It's my website is bayareastandupcomedy.com, and it links people to Books on B, which is in Hayward, and it's an independent place, and they will serve the whole country. So try to get it through there if you can. And then there's going to be lots of events, both in person and online. So
you can name those events, because like I said, I will release this episode during that week. So what are those events?
On Thursday, I'm going to be, it's Thursday the 17th, I believe. I'm going to be at the Beat Museum in San Francisco, and I'm going to be doing 100 years of stand-up in San Francisco. So going from 1860 to like 1980. So it's actually more. And then on Saturday, big book release party at the Alameda Comedy Club. And then the day after, we are doing a Zoom thing with Books on B. And then I also have a future one later in February with the Silent Film Museum in Niles. And then one coming up in Alameda again in March.
So the one in Alameda Comedy Club, is that something anyone can attend? Did they have to buy tickets?
Free. It's totally free. It's at 4 in the afternoon. And I just ordered a red velvet cake from a place in Hayward. That's great. Okay. So come for that.
And then where can people find your stand-up dates?
I list everything. Some is accurate, some isn't. But that is on ninagcomedian.com.
I like how, remember, we were trying to book this and you gave me the wrong website too.
Yes.
I was like, yeah, it's not working. Are you sure?
Yeah. The joys of dyslexia. There you go.
Are you active at all on Instagram? Is there people want people to follow you there somewhere? How can they follow you?
Pretty much everywhere. I am Nina G. Comedian. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And of course, the noise would finally stop here at the that's how it is, folks. Whenever you're shooting anything
Yes.
on location or out, there's always going to be noise issues like that.
Now it's so quiet. Wow.
Yeah, this is usually what it's like. Yeah. So hopefully I can get all that. Like that stuff, that doesn't really matter because these mics are pointed right at us. They're not really getting it. But that consistent, like, that's... Hopefully I can cut that out.
Yeah.
But Nina, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I hope you had a
Appreciate
blast.
the time.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you like the book.
Yeah. Okay, folks, thanks for listening. Hey guys, so thanks for tuning into the podcast, and a big thanks again to the fine folks at Sonity for letting us record the podcast here and for hooking us up with their delicious boba milk tea drinks. My wife Chris and I review boba milk tea spots all over the Bay Area. Believe me when I say that Sonity is definitely one of the best boba milk tea shops around. Make sure to follow them on Instagram at SAN as in Nancy, and as in Nancy again, A19, that's sana.na19 on Instagram. And if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure to hit that follow/subscribe button and make sure to give us a 5-star rating to give us some algorithm love. Okay? Thanks for listening.